It was a warm, sunny afternoon at a busy gas station just outside the city. The sounds of cars pulling in and out, the faint hum of nearby trucks, and the occasional chatter of people going about their business filled the air. Among them was a young woman who looked like she had been running errands all day. She was visibly pregnant, her rounded belly a clear sign that she was in the final months of her pregnancy. She had been going nonstop, trying to finish all the tasks she needed to get done before she could go home and rest. The woman stood by her car, trying to push through the fatigue she was feeling. Her hand shook slightly as she pulled the nozzle from the gas pump, trying to get the gas into her car. She had parked the car carefully at the pump, but despite her efforts, the task seemed harder than usual. The weight of her pregnancy was beginning to take its toll. The hot sun made the air thick and uncomfortable, and every movement felt like an extra effort. She looked around, hoping someone might notice her struggle and offer to help, but the gas station was busy, and everyone seemed focused on their own tasks. She didn't want to make a scene or draw attention to herself, so she tried to continue, even though her body was telling her to stop and rest. She had gotten used to doing everything on her own, but that didn't make it any easier. Each step felt like a small challenge. A few pumps away, a car pulled up, its engine rumbling softly as it came to a stop. Lionel Messi, the world-famous soccer star, was sitting behind the wheel. He had been traveling all day for a promotional event, and like most of the people at the gas station, he needed a break. He glanced around, looking for a place to fill up his car. As he stepped out, his eyes caught sight of the pregnant woman. He noticed the way she struggled with the gas pump, her movements slower and less steady than usual. For a moment, Messi just watched her, unsure of whether he should intervene. It was a busy day, and he wasn't sure if she wanted or needed help. But something in the way she moved, the way her face showed signs of exhaustion, made him feel a tug in his chest. Messi had seen so much during his life, and his career had taken him to places far beyond what most people would ever experience. But it was moments like this that reminded him of what truly mattered: kindness and human connection. He took a deep breath and walked toward the woman. "Excuse me, do you need help with that?" Messi asked softly, his voice calm and gentle, with no hint of his fame attached to it. The woman looked up, a little surprised. She hadn't expected anyone to notice her struggle, let alone someone as famous as Lionel Messi. She blinked, unsure if she had heard correctly. Was this really him? The soccer star who played for one of the world's biggest clubs. But before she could say anything, Messi offered a warm, genuine smile, waiting patiently for her to respond. For a moment, the woman hesitated. She had always been independent, preferring to handle things on her own. But there was something in Messi's calm demeanor, something that made her feel like it was okay to accept the help. Slowly, she nodded and smiled back, relieved that someone had finally noticed her and offered assistance. And just like that, the unexpected meeting between a pregnant woman at a gas station and one of the most famous athletes in the world began. Little did she know, this moment was about to turn into something that would leave her feeling more grateful and inspired than she could ever have imagined. As Messi stepped closer to the pregnant woman, he could see the weariness in her face. Her tired eyes reflected the struggles of the day, as though she had been on her feet for hours, running errands and checking off lists. He could tell she was doing her best to manage everything herself, but it was clear that the weight of her pregnancy was making things harder. The gas pump nozzle seemed heavier than usual in her hands, and her movements were slow, as though she was carefully considering every step. She hesitated for a moment after Messi spoke, unsure if she should accept help. She had always been the kind of person who preferred to manage on her own, especially during moments like these when she felt exhausted. There was a sense of pride in her independence, a desire to push through challenges without asking anyone for help. But as she glanced up at Messi, something in his calm expression made her reconsider. He wasn't demanding or pushy. He wasn't even drawing attention to himself. He simply looked like someone who genuinely wanted to help. The woman sighed softly and placed the gas nozzle back in its holder for a moment. Her feet ached, and the heat of the day made it even harder to focus. She smiled at Messi, a small, appreciative smile, and nodded. "I would appreciate it, actually," she said softly, her voice tinged with relief. "I'm just so tired, and I've been running around all day." Messi smiled back, his eyes kind and understanding. He could relate. He knew what it was like to feel physically drained after a long day, even if his daily life was very different from hers. It wasn't just the physical exhaustion she was dealing with. It was the mental fatigue, too. It was the kind of tiredness that made simple tasks feel overwhelming, like climbing a mountain when you're already at the bottom. With a few smooth movements, Messi took the gas nozzle from her hands, guiding it back into the pump. The woman stepped back, watching him as he carefully adjusted the nozzle, making sure it was securely placed. As he worked, she felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. She had been so focused on doing everything herself, on not bothering anyone, that she hadn't realized how much she needed a moment to relax and let someone else take over. It was a small act, but to her, it felt like a weight was lifted off her shoulders. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, taking a deep breath and allowing herself a moment of peace. The sound of the gas flowing into her car was soothing, a reminder that things were being taken care of, even if just for a moment. Messi finished filling up the tank, carefully watching as the meter clicked closer to the final amount. When he was done, he turned to the woman, offering her a reassuring smile. "There you go," he said quietly. "All done." The woman blinked, feeling a sense of relief she hadn't expected. She thanked him again, this time with more sincerity in her voice. "Thank you so much. That was very kind of you." Messi simply nodded, his face still calm and friendly. He didn't make a big deal out of it. He didn't need to. Helping someone in need, even in the smallest of ways, didn't require recognition or applause. It was just the right thing to do. As she slowly gathered her thoughts, the woman found herself feeling less alone in that moment. She had been struggling with everything for so long, feeling as though the world was moving faster than she could keep up. But with Messi's quiet kindness, something had shifted. It was as if, in that small interaction, the world had paused for a moment, allowing her to catch her breath. Little did she know, this brief exchange was about to become a turning point, one that would stay with her long after she left the gas station. As the woman stood there, watching Messi quietly finish the task she had struggled with just moments before, she couldn't help but feel a sense of disbelief. She had never imagined that someone as famous as him would take the time to help a stranger like herself. She had heard of celebrities doing good deeds before, but somehow, seeing it in person felt different, more real. It wasn't about the fame or the recognition. It was about the kindness of a simple gesture that she had never expected. She took a deep breath, still processing the fact that Lionel Messi had just helped her, a woman who was struggling to manage on her own. She wasn't used to people offering help without expecting anything in return. She had always been the kind of person who kept to herself, never asking for help, never wanting to burden others. But Messi's act had softened something inside her, a reminder that there were still good people in the world, people who saw beyond the surface and cared about others' well-being. As Messi finished putting the gas pump back in its place, he turned to face her with a warm, gentle smile. His eyes reflected a genuine kindness, the kind that wasn't just a show for the public, but came from a place of deep sincerity. "I hope that made things a little easier for you," he said, his voice calm and reassuring. The woman smiled back, still a little surprised by his kindness. "Thank you again," she said, her voice softer now, full of appreciation. "I really didn't expect anyone to notice, let alone offer help." Messi nodded, as if it were no big deal. "Sometimes people just need a little assistance, you know," he replied. "It's nothing. I'm glad I could help." She looked at him, feeling a sense of comfort in his words. They were simple, but they meant so much to her. His humility was striking, considering his global fame and the millions of fans who admired him for his soccer skills. But here, in this quiet moment at a gas station, he was just a man helping another person, no cameras, no spotlight. For a brief moment, they stood there in silence, the noise of the world around them fading into the background. The woman felt her nerves settle, the exhaustion from the day no longer quite as overwhelming as it had been just moments ago. It was as if, by allowing herself to accept help, she had released some of the burden she had been carrying. She had learned something important in that moment. Sometimes it was okay to let someone else take the load, even if it meant letting go of her pride for a little while. Messi didn't seem to rush off either. He wasn't looking at his watch, wasn't glancing at the cars around him. Instead, he stood there, allowing her the time she needed to gather herself. The woman couldn't help but feel a sense of respect for him, not just for his soccer talent, but for the person he was in moments like this. Finally, she spoke again, more calmly this time. "I hope I'm not keeping you," she said, feeling a bit awkward but also grateful for the interaction. "No, not at all," Messi replied with another smile. "I'm in no hurry. I'm happy to help." As he finished these words, she felt a quiet warmth spread through her chest. It wasn't about grand gestures or anything flashy. It was about the quiet act of kindness that had made her feel seen, valued, and cared for. And in that brief exchange, she felt a sense of connection to this stranger, a sense of shared humanity that transcended all the things that typically separated people: celebrity, social status, background. For that one moment, they were simply two people, one offering help, the other accepting it. Nothing more, nothing less. As Messi waved goodbye and turned to walk back to his car, the woman stood still for a moment, reflecting on the unexpected kindness she had just received. She would carry this memory with her, not just as a story of a famous athlete helping her out, but as a reminder of how important it was to offer kindness to others, and to accept it when it was offered. As Messi walked back to his car, the woman stood there, watching him for a moment. It was hard to believe that something so small could have such an impact. She had spent so much of her life trying to manage everything herself, convinced that asking for help was a sign of weakness. But Messi had shown her, in the simplest way, that accepting help was not only okay, it could actually bring a sense of relief and comfort she hadn't realized she needed. The moment he walked away, a wave of gratitude swept over her. She felt lighter, as though a burden she hadn't even known she was carrying had been lifted. It wasn't just the physical help with the gas. It was the way he had taken the time to notice her, to offer a hand when he didn't have to. It was as if, for just a moment, the world had slowed down, and someone had truly seen her, not just as a pregnant woman struggling at a gas station, but as a person with her own challenges and needs. She watched Messi get back into his car, his movements calm and purposeful, as if helping her had been nothing out of the ordinary. To him, it was just a kind gesture. But to her, it felt like a reminder that the world was full of unexpected kindness, and that sometimes even the smallest acts could make the biggest difference. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden realization. The woman had been so caught up in her own struggles, in her need to be independent, that she had forgotten about the power of human connection. The simple act of someone reaching out to help could create a ripple effect, one that left a lasting impact not only on the person receiving the help, but also on the person offering it. Messi didn't know her, and yet he had taken a moment out of his day to make hers easier. It was an act of kindness that she would remember for a long time. She couldn't help but think about how rare it was to see someone of Messi's stature being so humble, so down to earth. Most people who were in the public eye often had a certain image to uphold, sometimes distancing themselves from regular people or acting as if they were above others. But Messi had shown none of that. There was no arrogance, no sense of entitlement. He had simply offered his help, with no expectation of anything in return. That, she realized, was what made his kindness so remarkable. As she started to get into her own car, she couldn't stop smiling. The day had started off as just another exhausting trip to run errands, but now it felt different. She felt a renewed sense of hope, a reminder that there was goodness in the world, even in the most ordinary of places. She knew she would remember this moment for a long time, not because it was something grand or extraordinary, but because it was so simple and real. And in a world that often felt overwhelming, that simplicity was exactly what she needed. She glanced once more at Messi's car as he drove off, his figure disappearing into the distance. It was as if the encounter had never happened, and yet, in a way, it had changed everything. She had been reminded of something so basic, yet so powerful: the importance of kindness, the beauty of human connection, and the strength that comes from allowing yourself to accept help when you need it. It was a lesson she would carry with her, a lesson that would continue to inspire her long after the gas station was far behind her. As the woman drove away from the gas station, her thoughts were still focused on the unexpected encounter with Lionel Messi. She couldn't help but replay the moments in her mind over and over, each time feeling more grateful for the simple act of kindness he had shown her. It was strange, in a way. She had met so many people throughout her life, but this brief interaction with someone who was practically a stranger had made such an impact. It wasn't about the help with the gas. It was about the way he had made her feel, noticed, valued, and cared for. But as the day went on and she found herself back home, a thought began to nag at the back of her mind. She realized that she had a chance to do something she hadn't considered before: share what had happened. The more she thought about it, the more she felt that this wasn't just a story about a famous person helping her. It was a story about humanity, about kindness, and about how the smallest gestures could mean the most. By the time she had settled into her evening routine, she knew what she wanted to do. She grabbed her phone and began typing out the story. At first, she wasn't sure how to start, but as she began to recall the details of what had happened, the words started to flow naturally. She wrote about how tired she had felt, about the struggle to get the gas into her car, and about how she hadn't expected anyone, let alone Lionel Messi, to offer help. She described the way he had approached her so calmly, the kindness in his voice, and how he had just helped her without any need for recognition or reward. It was a small moment, but one that had made a world of difference for her. As she finished writing, she couldn't help but smile. It felt good to share this story. It wasn't about boasting or trying to get attention. It was about spreading a message of kindness and showing the world that even someone with such a busy and public life as Messi could make time for others. She posted it on social media, unsure of what kind of response it would get, but hopeful that maybe, just maybe, someone else would be inspired by the simple act of kindness that had meant so much to her. What happened next was unexpected. Within minutes, her post began to gain traction. Comments poured in, many from people who were touched by the story. Some shared their own experiences of kindness they had received from strangers, while others simply expressed how heartwarming it was to hear about a famous figure acting with such humility. The post quickly gained attention, with people from all over the world responding to the message of compassion and selflessness. It was clear that Messi's small act of kindness had resonated far beyond just the woman he had helped. The woman's inbox was filled with messages of support, encouragement, and thanks. Some even asked if she had managed to thank Messi properly. She couldn't help but laugh at the thought, realizing that the interaction had felt so natural, so personal, that it hadn't even occurred to her to take a photo or ask for an autograph. It wasn't about that. It was about the moment itself, and how it had impacted her in a way that no autograph or picture could. As the day turned to night, she found herself reflecting on the power of the story she had shared. She realized that it wasn't just a story about a famous soccer player helping someone at a gas station. It was a reminder that kindness was everywhere, and that it didn't matter who you were, whether you were a famous athlete, a mother trying to get through the day, or anyone else in between. Kindness was a universal language, one that could change someone's life with just a simple gesture. And as the woman fell asleep that night, she couldn't help but feel grateful, not just for the help Messi had given her, but for the reminder that kindness was all around us, if we only stopped to notice. As the days passed, the woman found herself reflecting more and more on the events that had unfolded at the gas station. The story of Lionel Messi's simple act of kindness had not only affected her, but it had sparked a wave of positive energy that was still rippling through her life. The messages she had received continued to pour in, and each new response seemed to bring with it a sense of warmth and encouragement. People from all walks of life shared how they had been touched by the story, some recalling their own moments of kindness, while others expressed their admiration for Messi's humility. But what struck her most were the messages from people who had never expected something as simple as a gesture of help to impact them so deeply. One person shared how the story had reminded them to be more aware of the people around them, to offer help when they saw someone struggling, no matter how small the task. Another mentioned how they had gone out of their way that day to do something kind for a neighbor in need, inspired by the reminder that kindness is everywhere if you look for it. As the story continued to spread, it took on a life of its own. News outlets picked up the tale, and soon the story of the pregnant woman and the kind soccer star was shared across the globe. The woman, though still in awe of the attention, was more focused on the deeper message that was unfolding. It wasn't just about Messi's fame or the help he had offered. It was about the reminder that anyone, no matter their status or background, could make a difference in someone else's life. Kindness, it seemed, was universal. With each new post, comment, and story shared, the woman's belief in the goodness of people began to grow. She had always known that there was kindness in the world, but it wasn't until this moment that she truly understood how far-reaching and powerful it could be. It was as though every kind word, every act of compassion, created a chain reaction that brought people closer together, breaking down barriers and fostering a sense of community. She started thinking about how this simple story had not only impacted her, but also inspired a collective shift in others. People were opening their eyes to the small moments that often go unnoticed, the ones that, when put together, make the world a better place. She realized that sometimes the world doesn't need grand gestures to change. It just needs more of those quiet moments where people show up for one another, even in the most unexpected places. As the woman sat down to read through some of the stories others had shared, she began to feel a sense of connection with people she had never met. She felt less alone in her own struggles, knowing that there were others who had experienced similar moments of kindness and who, like her, had been touched by the smallest acts. It was as if the world had opened up a little bit more, and she was part of a bigger, kinder whole. Her heart swelled with gratitude. She had been reminded of something so simple yet so powerful, that kindness doesn't need to be loud or extravagant. It doesn't need to be acknowledged or rewarded. Sometimes, it's just a quiet gesture that means the world to someone, and that's enough. And she thought about how that was the kind of world she wanted to live in. A world where people took the time to notice each other, to offer a helping hand, and to spread kindness wherever they could. The woman felt a sense of peace as she closed her phone and looked out the window. The world may be full of challenges and uncertainties, but it was also full of beauty, compassion, and moments like these, moments that could make all the difference in someone's day, and maybe even in their life. She knew that she would carry this lesson with her, and it was a lesson she would share with others for years to come. After all, it wasn't about the grand gestures. It was about the quiet, everyday acts that made the world a kinder place. As the weeks went by, the woman's life began to settle back into a routine, but something had shifted in her. She couldn't stop thinking about the kindness that had changed her perspective on so many things. Every time she walked into a store, passed by someone in need, or even just saw a person struggling with something simple, she was reminded of the powerful impact small gestures could have. She had never imagined that something as simple as filling up a gas tank could ripple out into something so much bigger, affecting not just her, but so many others as well. Her social media post had continued to gain attention, and people were still commenting on her story. It wasn't just about the celebrity who had helped her anymore. It had turned into a conversation about kindness, about how people could do more for each other, and how easy it was to overlook those quiet moments that had the potential to make someone's day. She found herself thinking about all the people who had reached out to share their own stories. It made her realize that these moments of kindness weren't as rare as they seemed. They were happening all the time, but people often didn't notice them or talk about them as much as they should. One evening, as she was grocery shopping, she saw an elderly man struggling to reach for an item on the top shelf. Without thinking, she stepped forward and helped him, placing the can of beans into his cart. He smiled at her with surprise and gratitude, his eyes lighting up as if she had just done something extraordinary. She was reminded of the way she had felt when Messi had helped her, how something so simple had meant so much. And in that moment, she understood the power of kindness even more. The woman realized that, though her story with Messi had been the catalyst for her reflection, the lessons were far broader. It wasn't about looking for moments of grandeur or waiting for the perfect opportunity to help. It was about the small, everyday chances to show someone they mattered. Every time she helped a stranger, smiled at someone who looked like they needed it, or did something thoughtful for a friend, she felt a little more connected to the world around her. These moments, no matter how small, were what made life feel rich and meaningful. She also started noticing how kindness could be contagious. After her simple act in the grocery store, she saw someone else hold the door for a mom with a stroller, and then someone else offer to help a student pick up books that had fallen from her backpack. It was as if the kindness had spread, like a small spark that had ignited more sparks, and now people were passing it on without even thinking. It made her realize that kindness, when it's given, doesn't just stop with one person. It has a way of creating a ripple effect that can reach far beyond the initial moment. A few months later, when the woman was reflecting on everything that had happened, she thought about how far-reaching the effects of one small act of kindness could be. She never expected her story to go viral, and she certainly never imagined that it would lead to a deeper understanding of kindness and human connection. But it had, and now she felt a sense of responsibility to carry that lesson forward. She thought about how often people focus on the negatives in life, on the things that are wrong with the world, on the injustices and struggles that seem endless. It was easy to get caught up in all of that, to feel overwhelmed by the challenges of life. But what Messi had shown her was that sometimes the best way to make a difference was by focusing on the good, the kindness we can offer to each other. It wasn't about changing the whole world at once. It was about changing someone's world, even if it was just for a moment. With that in mind, she decided that she wanted to do more. She wanted to pay forward the kindness she had received, whether it was helping a neighbor with groceries, offering a comforting word to a friend who needed it, or just being more patient with the people around her. She knew that every little act of kindness counted. The more she did, the more she saw how the world could shift, even if only in small, quiet ways. And so, as she went on with her life, she carried this new understanding with her. The story with Messi had reminded her of something important, that no act of kindness is too small, and that even the simplest moments can have a lasting impact. It wasn't just about the person you helped. It was about the world you were creating, one small gesture at a time. And in that world, she felt more connected, more hopeful, and more determined than ever to pass on the kindness she had been shown.